Alright, so here we go. No fancy intro today, just because my laptop is at the repair center, so I have to just record something and upload it. You know, I don't drink alcohol, I don't smoke, I don't use drugs, I don't even drink coffee. But this is one of my weaknesses. And just, you know, seeing it in this video, I already feel like eating it, but I'll just save that for a bit later. This is actually from a Dutch brand, Facade. It's made quite close to where I live. And today we're going to talk about an ink of which I received a sample, and that is Diamine Chocolat. Let's start with a fine sample. So I mean, loving chocolate, I'm pretty interested in what this ink is how it's going to turn out. AT8. Some chocolate. By the way, for those of you who are interested, last week I've shown you this flex pen, and there was that gap between the nib and the feed. That gap is now gone. So I'm hoping we'll get some decent flex this week without excessive troubles. Alright, medium. We're switching tenses here, always fun. Love it when things get tense. Broad nibbage. Italic. It's funny, I always write this I like this when I do this italic symbol, because I never write it like that, but I don't know. Inkcyclopedia brings out the worst in me. Evil laughter. Trademark. Alright, a bit of flex writing. Oh yeah, these days it's not +1, it's what I heart or something. I'm not a great drawer of hearts, but they have it. All right, looks good to me. So I'm going to do the first of 3 passes, and then we'll have an interim analysis of this stuff we got going. 1, 2, 3. Let me already do a bit of fat writing now that I have this pen uncapped. C for chocolate. That's a bit poor calligraphy, but that's alright. It's not really a calligraphy lesson. Let's just add one element to make it a bit more exciting visually. Okay. So, interim analysis. What have we got? What we got is a brown ink. I think that is it cannot be mistaken for anything else. Some nice shading going on. I wouldn't call this shading excessive. Now we have to bear in mind it's a very dark ink. Often I think shading is easier to see in a lighter ink. But even so, it does a pretty nice job. If I take this little pointing thing, then I do think you actually see some shading going on there. A nice intense dark brown, and when I see this, I actually think of chocolate. So it's pretty well chosen in its color. All right, then we should do some normal writing. A true lover of chocolate loves dark chocolate, but for some reason I prefer milk. I'm such a sweet person. I once we were having a discussion with some students about a teaching we had done. A colleague and I, we had sort of an evaluation with some students who had taken that course. This has to dry, so I'm just talking. One of those students was a chocolate lover, and he brought some of that, I don't know what it was, 99% cocoa chocolate or whatever, the super dark stuff. And he said, well, this, if you like chocolate, then this is very interesting. And I thought, well, I like chocolate. I took a bite of that stuff. Now, I will not repeat here what I thought, but that stuff is really strong, and it's almost like eating a powder of kinds. It's a very weird texture, and the taste is really overpowering. It's very intense taste, so if you ever get a chance to try that out, then do so. I also once ate chocolate with wasabi in it. Someone brought that to me, not from Japan, but from Switzerland, where apparently they have a lot of that stuff going too. And it was very, very interesting, I can tell you that. Alright, so let's do a second pass. I think it's dry enough. Maybe at the very bottom it's still a bit wet, but the largest part it should be alright. There we go. Alright, I'll come back for a third pass. This is not yet dry enough to do that water test. This is definitely doing something to the ink, although I can still read the writing, which is good. I think we can do something that everyone has been waiting for, the Tardif test. And because I cannot really edit this video, you will have to do without the soundtrack, and you'll have to bear with me with usually I try to edit out me putting ink on this ridiculously small sword, etc. But I cannot edit it out right now, so you'll just have to bear with me. Alright, and then we have another moment I know a lot of you are kind of waiting for. The brown benchmark. Now that is one of the better ones I've done, I should say. I'm just dipping my finger in some water here to get the worst bits of ink off. Alright, even that doesn't really help. Okay, so we've got that going. I think this is pretty much dry. So I'm going to grab the eyedropper of death. And we'll see about that in a second. But before that, first of all I'm going to put the cap on that sample, because I've got a strange feeling I'm going to spill that everywhere. Alright, then I actually want to make that third pass here. Very dark chocolate. And while all of this is drying, I think we can start to work on our score card. So, let's cleaning. I'm going to give this a middle score. It's a saturated ink, it's quite dark, but I've never had any issues cleaning out a Diamine ink. Bleed through. Something we'll have to assess later. The color is dark brown. We have some shading going on. As I said before, I wouldn't call that excessive. You can see that in a very low saturated nib and a very saturated nib, it goes from a brown to a black. But you know, in everyday writing, even in a very wet nib like this Lamy Safari Broad nib, There is some shading, but I really wouldn't call this excessive, so I wonder whether it even deserves the score 2. Definitely not a 1, but okay, I'm gonna give this 2 because there is something. Even, and for, you know, for a dark ink, I think that's pretty well, pretty interesting. You see those lovely splatters of ink from the brown benchmark? I think that's kind of cool. Okay, we have flow. Flow is excellent. I haven't had any issues with that whatsoever, so that's really cool. We have feathering, which we'll have to assess after the copier paper. We have drying time, which doesn't seem to be too bad, nothing too excessive, but seems to work well. And then we have waterproofness, and that is something we'll have to assess now. No! Alright, I'm going to remove the excess ink. And what we have there is ink that is pretty much eradicated. Although, in all honesty, you can still sort of read it. But this was, I mean, this was just layers of water. I think this is more representative, and as you can see, the writing, I just put quite some ink on my brush, and the writing is still legible. So as to waterproofness, it's not a 1, but I will definitely give this a 2. It's not that bad at all. Alright, and I think we should now just change the paper from Rhodia. I love how this benchmark area is getting more attractive every week. So, we switch, we have some copier paper, and we go through all the motions yet again. Fine. I feel like eating chocolate mousse. Wait a minute, that's abroad. The order of my pens was screwed up. It is now unscrewed up. You feel chocolate mousse. He, she, or it feels like eating chocolate mousse. It looks like some bacteria now, but it's actually just chocolate mousse. I mean, don't we? And then we have some flecks. Let me just zoom out a bit there. Alright. The big test. And there we go. It's something that has to do with this pen. But it's usually coming back to writing fairly quickly now. I'm not going to torture you by having this thing railroad all the time. Although it seems to be okay now. Okay. And then I want to have some fat writing you know what this is? It's a chocolate mousse. Now, honor to those who deserve it. Chocolate mousse is a sketch from the Swedish chef from the Muppets. I can really recommend you look it up because I thought it was quite funny. Chocolate on the mousse, mousse, more, that kind of stuff. I thought it was a lot of fun. So, go ahead. Yeah. Succulent chocolate. Alright. So what we've got going here. Shading, alright. Fancy zooming. I don't see a whole lot of feathering there, but I definitely see feathering in the flex writing. Now when it comes to that really fat writing, again, I don't see a lot of feathering, even in spots where there's a lot of ink. I don't know what that is exactly. Is that ink? Oh yeah, that's ink. So I can sort of color the mousse. Alright. I don't really see any feathering there. I don't really see it there. So it seems to me to be a pretty well-behaved ink, unless you really decide to go ballistic and start doing full flex on cheap paper, which is quite interesting. Bleed through. I'm expecting quite some. Yes. Definitely bleed through in the flex writing. You already see some of it in the broad writing, a little bit in the italic, maybe even some in the medium writing. Definitely a lot in the very fat writing. Now, when it comes to Rhodia paper, there is bleed through in the third pass of the passes test, and there's the brown benchmark. But in the normal writing, there's actually no bleed through at all. A little bit here with that fat writing that I made wet. So I think that's actually quite nice. So I would say that bleed through is a 2, decent score. Feathering, I would say, is, well, it's good, not perfect. I would say a 2 as well. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13. Inkage score 13. Alright, now finally I'd like to compare this ink to another ink. And that's what we're going to do right now. So what we have here is this chocolate. And another ink that I think is fairly close to it is Diamine Café des Îles. It's maybe a little bit lighter, but I think it has the same sort of brownish quality. I mean, clearly both are brown ink, so that's not too strange, but it kind of reminded me of that. And maybe because of the name, with cafe and then chocolate and that stuff. But I think that's a pretty nice ink too. It's probably a little bit lighter, but I don't have a darker brown than the chocolate. And you know what? That's all there's to it. So here we have it. Inkcyclopedia entry for chocolat. I hope this was useful, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.